So thank you everybody for having us here. My name is Robert Matthews. I'm a Vice President of Gannett Fleming. I am the Highway Engineering Practice Lead at Gannett Fleming. So we're here to talk something a little bit different maybe than you've heard today because we really operate in the horizontal space, not necessarily the vertical space, which is a little bit different. We're based in the US. Our company's about 3,000 people. We specialize in transportation mainly, although we do the wide breadth of engineering and architectural services. In the US, BIM, especially in the horizontal space, is not widely adopted. And we say the United States, it's not really very united. We have 50 separate, distinct states that operate differently. They all have different standards. We do have federal standards, but generally speaking, they all have their own way of doing things. And most of those ways are archaic, medieval, in the old way of doing things. I still sign and seal paper plans and deliver packages of plans to DOT professionals who will then take out their red pencils and give me 3,000 comments on our plans. So that's the context of where we're coming from. But we do recognize that the horizontal world is going to get there in BIM. And so we've taken the initiative as a firm to not catch up to our peers, not catch up to the DOTs once they do that, but to actually try to lead and help our departments of transportation get there and be a leader in this space. But I've heard a lot about process, people, and technology today, and data. Which of those things do you think is the most complex? Anybody have an idea? Bingo, people. People is the most complex part of that equation. And so that's really what the focus of our presentation is going to be about today. I'm going to let Anand, who's our digital delivery leader, talk about it because training and dealing with workforce development and getting people from point A to point B in this new paradigm of model-centric digital delivery is really important. So I'm going to turn it over to Anand and let him take it from here.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Robert. So one of the primary things, driving forces for this presentation is, not just changing the culture of adoption, but also changing our colleagues. Because at the end of the day, while it's professional, it's also personal. I'll show you a slide later on because it's Robert's sign and seal. It's his name, so that trust has to be there. So, the model as a legal document, but what is driving the model, right? It's data, and ultimately, we are in this field to produce something that's tangible, and as Chris said, that's something that's rooted in geography, something that's physical. But what is data? Can anybody really answer what is data, right? Can we touch it? Can we feel it? Can we see it? Can we smell it? It does not directly impact our senses. However, the information that it produces, that the information as a result of going through our professional expertise has a direct impact on our senses. That's where a lot of I believe, the angst, the frustration, the apprehension comes about. So, these are just kind of slides to kind of state where things are going, what there is. We clearly are at an inflection point in the amount of data that's produced. Until now, how many alphabets in the English language, right? 26. Anybody know the number of words in the Oxford Dictionary? There's 175,000 words. It's still manageable, 26 to 175,000, okay? No problem. How many sentences there are, and how many essays, how many reports. So that's the kind of magnitude of the scope of the issue that we are dealing with, the amount of data and the permutations and combinations there are with it. That leads us to kind of a interesting problem or issue. We for hundreds of years as engineers have established a quality control. We have artifacts that prove that we did that quality control. These are some gaps. I think Brian's Homer Simpson's meme does a better job than this. It's basically a nerdy version of that diagram, of that meme. Here's where the interesting piece about changing the workforce comes into place. Every state, as Robert said, is in a different path on this journey, but the standard of care also changes for wherever the states are. I want you to pause and read the first quote there, and this is one of the consequences of civil engineers not doing their job properly. Yes, it's not that graphic anymore, but it's still an important consequence to consider, right? And hence, building trust is really, really important among us, and that's kind of gives you a brief history of the licensure in the U.S. My kids are not going to die, but that's really important to consider. We talk a lot about adoption. At the same time, I also want to stress in this book called "To Engineer is Human," the author makes a really good point about our field. Other engineers, and not to put them down, software engineers, how often can they recall a product? Every day. Even automobile engineers can recall their product. How many of you can recall your building or structures or anything like that? It's not possible, right? Again, this kind of goes back to the 26 alphabets or our Lego blocks. You end up with a nice, decent infrastructure product, but the same thing can be combined to make a really crappy building or a building that just doesn't even exist. So how did we go about this? As we understood that it's a paradigm shift, which means it's a theoretical change and also a practical change. So we did some technological stuff, which was kind of easy maybe in some ways. But the more important part was for us to change the culture a little bit. And to that, Robert spoke a little bit about starting this group, which was ahead of the curve. And then we started by talking to people, our colleagues who have been doing this for a long time. And we understood and heard their perspectives to develop learning paths that worked for them, which didn't mean that everything was okay. We had to ground them in facts. So this is the first step that we acknowledged that it was a change there. So often in change management, what happens is as an industry, and multiple industries have borrowed this change, which is basically a cycle of grief from a study on aging and death. And everybody thinks that all of us follow this path in change management. It works for grief, but it does not work for technological adoption for everybody. So these are some of the consequences of early project comparisons there. But to build trust, our first step was with our colleagues. We went and talked to them, and these are obviously not the real names of our colleagues, but you can see everybody has a different perspective. And the reason why this is important is that often in training, we would think that, okay, we need to draw an alignment. Everybody learns the same way. Not necessarily, because they might come from it from different perspectives, different timelines, different project experiences. So at the end of the day, by hearing different perspectives, we know the end goal is to produce a horizontal corridor, and how can we get there? Sometimes it might be as simple as having a over-the-shoulder training. Sometimes it's giving them the video and let them watch it at a later time. So to this end, just to show you, earlier on we talked about it just goes from denial to acceptance, but different profiles of our colleagues had different ways of going through that journey, and we have to stand by them to get to that acceptance part. We can't just say, you have to do it, because then there will be gaps. It'll be like the Homer Simpson meme that was shared earlier. There needs to be an approach from the bottom up as well, building that trust. We can't recall our products. We rely on our colleagues' accuracy and their their acceptance of it too. So this is just the same story about different people experiencing it a different way. We've done this on multiple projects, and at the end of the day, we kind of have a matrix, so to speak, and combine it with the standard ways of learning frameworks. So some of it is like one-on-one direct training, some of it very instructional. Most things there's overlap, but often there isn't. Because sometimes you'll have a senior designer with 30 years experience who's exceptional at what they've been doing, and they're very focused on learning by themselves. That may not be the case with somebody in another geography. So this is another example. Obviously you can see they're all different cases. So I guess the takeaway from this is what we're saying is like to think about why we're doing certain things and not just take the knowledge that's there for granted, but always ask the question why. And when we meet with different groups across the country in our own company, Robert actually, credit to Robert, every time he says, ask why, even if the clients are asking this is how we've done it for many years. So by asking that, sometimes we get to the answer that maybe that's not really necessary. And it goes to some of one of the earlier slides where what the contractor was asking for versus what the architect was delivering. Sometimes it's already there. And so the takeaway is ask why. So thank you.
Thank you, Anand. Any questions immediately?
I want to ask regarding the resistance to change. The photo you have shown, there is a denial, there is a depression, and later on acceptance. Isn't we shouldn't, I believe, in your opinion, not to put it on the individuals. I mean, for example, now a company want to implement BIM. Okay, the company should try to introduce the BIM, train the people, increase their skills. So maybe after all, these people will not resist that much. So my question is, what is the duty of the companies to do to help the individual to accept the BIM or to accept the change?
Yeah.
In a company perspective.
Yeah, so I can take that one. So for example, Robert's our vice president, he's our national leader, and he has encouraged even somebody who's just starting out to ask the question why. So they've asked him why, and they ask me why. So that's like at the cultural level, ground up, what we have tried to do.
Yeah, I think the other thing is we really try to keep our focus on the clients. And so we have clients that will say, hey, I just need paper, so why would I spend the time? And people that work for us will say, why would I spend the time and energy to adopt BIM when my client just wants a piece of paper? They just want a 2D design. We try to look at it from the perspective of not necessarily like commanding everybody, hey, you all have to do this, but giving them the tools, the support, the training, the learning opportunities to upskill themselves at a point where they're always at least ahead of their client, right? They can always give their client a 2D piece of paper if that's what the client wants, but they can still work maybe in a 3D environment. So we're trying to upskill everybody at a pace that's comfortable for them and in a way that's comfortable for them so that they absorb it right, but also in a way that we still meet our clients' requirements.